to estimate your duty? Perform a track and trace? Search for a declaration?
Then download the Jamaica Customs mobile app today. The time by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
12 p.m.
Thanks for joining us for CVM News at noon. It's Tuesday, February 10, 2026. I'm Amoy Harriet. We begin with tragic news of a brutal double murder in Rocky Point, Clarendon. A mother and her daughter were shot and killed during a gun attack at a bar on Monday night, while a man who was also injured remains hospitalized. The victims have been identified as 61-year-old Norma Spence and her 41-year-old daughter, Carrion Scott, both fish vendors in the area. Reports from the police indicate that around 8:45, the two women and a man were at a bar when three gunmen approached and opened fire, hitting all three. The attackers then escaped on foot. The injured man was taken to hospital for treatment, while Spence and Scott were pronounced dead on arrival. Investigations are ongoing. And an item of news just in. Police in St. James are presently probing another murder in the parish, this time in the community of Garlands in the southern hills of the parish. We'll have more details in subsequent newscasts. The Ministry of Education and Youth is expressing deep outrage following reports that a 4-year-old girl was murdered in a land settlement near Royal Flat, Manchester on Sunday. Portfolio Minister Dr. Dana Morris-Dixon says she's heartbroken as no parent should have to bury their young child. She also says Jamaica must protect its children from violence in all its forms, whether it be at home, in communities, on the roads, or in any space where they should be safe. Now, Member of Parliament and Minister of State in the ministry, Rhoda Moy Crawford, says, quote, "This was a child with a future, taken far too soon." End quote. Now, speaking on CVM's lead story, MP for Manchester Northwestern, Michael Phillips, called for additional security in the parish.
I've always asked for more resources for the police in Manchester, not because we are generally quiet, that we to ignore what may happen. And what we've been seeing is that there are a lot of persons coming from other parishes that have been damaged by Hurricane Melissa and have been relocating to Manchester. Hence, we're seeing more break-ins, we're seeing more violent crimes happening in the parish.
A man who has been evading the police since 2024 in connection with the murder of his wife, a British national, is now in police custody in Westmoreland. 37-year-old Andre Morrison, who was wanted for the death of his 67-year-old Dawn Rose Anderson since December 2, 2024, was apprehended in the neighboring parish of St. James at the weekend. Police say he was picked up under another name during an operation. However, following investigations, Morrison's true identity revealed, ending the 2-year search. Reports are that his late wife, a naturalized British national, returned to Jamaica in November 2024. It's also reported she spent a night at a Montego Bay resort before she was picked up by her husband with the intention of going to their home in Roaring River, Westmoreland. Now, that was the last day she was seen or heard from. Morrison filed a missing persons report, and he told investigators that he took his wife to visit a friend in Negril as she disappeared shortly after. Now, an investigation was launched. However, Morrison and his twin brother Kemar fled the community of Roaring River. Both were listed as prime suspects in the disappearance of his wife, whose body was discovered in a shallow grave 8 days later by residents in an area known as Farm Common. Former Commissioner of Police, Rear Admiral Hardley Lewin, says the formation of the JCF's new Specialized Investigation Branch, SIB, could better position the force to respond to sophisticated and interconnected criminal networks. Now, the new SIB announced on Sunday integrates much of the work the Counterterrorism and Organized Crime Investigations Branch, CTOC, previously covered, leading mainly to conclude CTOC has been disbanded following a drug-related scandal at the unit.
When we have the kind of force that we want, every policeman ought to be elite, right? The fact of the matter is there has to be changes from time to time as the landscape and the threat changes. Again, I come back to the point, I don't know whether this was something contemplated and it's just being put into effect because of this has happened now or whatever it is. But criminality is interconnected, all its strands of criminality. It's interrelated, it is sophisticated, and what we have done, or what the Commissioner has done, sorry, is that he has fused the investigative arms. So what you get out of this one unit under one command is a fusion center. So we don't have silos. One group investigating gun crimes, one investigating drugs, when in fact drugs and guns are interrelated.
The government is this afternoon strongly rejecting what it says is a false online report claiming that Jamaica turned away a Cuban-registered tanker seeking to refill liquefied petroleum gas. This comes on the heels of an oil crisis now gripping Cuba, as no fuel has entered the country since the naval blockade on Venezuela in December, bringing transport, electricity, and basic services to a standstill. Energy Minister Darrell Vaz says the report cites no credible sources and says neither the government nor any local oil and gas entity was contacted to verify the claim. He says Petrojam remains Jamaica's largest importer of LPG for industrial, commercial, and household use, and there has been no disruption to supply.
It's unfortunate that as minister had to instruct the ministry to send out a statement to refute the fake news in relation to the matter of oil and Cuba. I want to impress upon the well-thinking people of Jamaica that this can have serious international implications when this sort of fake news goes across the world. Please, I'm asking once again to listen out for the ministry and the government entities that have responsibility for disseminating information and only respond to that.
Now we'll hear more about the situation in Cuba later on during our international segment in the newscast. To other news now, a magnitude 5.6 earthquake was felt in sections of eastern Jamaica at 3:18 this morning. The earthquake unit reports the epicenter is located approximately 80 kilometers east of Mansionil, Portland, with a focal depth of 10 kilometers. The quake was felt in parts of Kingston and St. Andrew, St. Thomas and St. Catherine. Now, there were no immediate reports of damage or injuries. The Jamaica Fire Brigade, JFB, says it recorded a reduction in fire-related deaths in 2025. This improvement comes as the JFB continues focused efforts to address house fires, which remain the leading cause of fire-related fatalities. Now, bushfires, however, continue to pose a major challenge. Last year, the JFB reported a 26.2% increase in bushfires across the island. Commissioner of the JFB, Stuart Beckford, says one of the brigade's key strategies has been public education, with a strong emphasis on teaching fire safety to children.
One of the things that we have also focused our attention on is really our schools, our institutions, because we believe starting with the youngsters is a good place to start. Once we educate the children, we know, because a lot of times we see fires occurring in their homes, is because children are sometimes left on their own, as you rightly pointed out. And not only are they left on their own, but matches, lighters, these things are sometimes left in their reach, and they are very much inquisitive and want to experiment, and so they will use these things to see how they work. And next thing you know, there's a fire. So arming these kids, we started in the primary schools, we're in the high schools. Last year we trained close to 1,000 fire wardens in schools.
It's time now for a break, but stay with us for a live interview when we come back.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winford Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Welcome back to CVM News at Noon. The 2025 Corruption Perceptions Index published by Transparency International is out, and it's showing that corruption is getting worse globally. Joining us to talk about what's happening here in Jamaica, we have Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, Mikel Jackson. Good afternoon, Ms. Jackson.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. So talk to us. Jamaica ranked 73 and they scored 44 on the 2025 index, the same score as the year before. How is that score calculated?
So it's important to put in context for the listeners how the score is done. So when this range from 0, you're highly corrupt, to 100, very clean. Now, Jamaica, we have scored 44 since 2017, 2018, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. So you're seeing where we improved in 2017, but we've remained with the 44 since. And the question that we have to ask ourselves as citizens, why we have not gotten better, we haven't gotten worse, are we satisfied with the fact that there is no improvement and we are somehow stagnant? What is our feelings? What are some of the contributing factors why we have not seen improvement in our country when we want to have a system where we have improved significantly in our corruption score? And I think that is the question Jamaican citizens have to ask themselves today.
So what does Jamaica's score, that 44, what does it mean and what does it say about where we are, how we're doing as a country?
No, a score of 44 is moderate. But any score under 50 is generally not seen as good. And I think we have to put in context that the average score is 42. So while we're doing a little bit better than the average, and we're seeing a worsening globally with how countries are doing and the levels of corruption or perceived corruption in the countries, I don't think we should be satisfied with where we are, because a score generally below 50 means that there are still high levels of bribery, favoritism in public contracting, possibility of political influence, impunity, or weaknesses in our institutions. I think one of the things I must say, though, that we have a strong integrity commission in our country, which was established by law in 2017. Perhaps that's one of the contributing factors why we actually improved in 2017. The question, though, why have we not gotten any better? I think we have to look at several issues. we still see corruption matters emerging. The most recently, for example, maladministration based on the allegations of misuse of the tax exemption certificate recently at the University Hospital. We have a matter actively before the courts right now, and that is good. But we have not seen the improvements in the law. We know that the Integrity Commission Act, for example, was before a joint select committee. We have not seen the conclusion of that or any strong indication that we will see the strengthening of the institutions. But on the contrary, we have had public commentary from government officials that have made less than favorable comments towards the major anti-corruption agency. We don't have an anti-bribery act in this country, which means that some of the situations where a private sector agency may have been involved in bribery actions, we do not have robust mechanisms to deal with that. We don't have a strong framework that deals with conflict of interest. And I think generally, even our attitudes as citizens, it perhaps need improvement. Yes, people are angry about some of the situations that come up in the news broadcast, as CVM will say on the midday news, on the 5 o'clock news, 7 o'clock news. But are we angry enough to demand better and more from our government officials so that they know that they must do better, that they must have the enforcement of the laws that we have already and actually move towards strengthening of the institution? Perhaps it's a combination of all of those factors where we have not seen the improvement in the scores in the country.
Now I want to talk a little bit more about the legislation shortly, but what would you say to the school of thought that, we haven't moved from 44 in the last couple of years, then Jamaica hasn't gotten worse in terms of corruption? At least we not get worse. What's your response to that school of thought?
No, an unchanged score suggests stagnation. And while it's not worsening, I don't think we should settle ourselves with a country that is still performing below the 50, which suggests again that there's bribery. As civil society, as media practitioners, we have to remind the public, for example, when a public body utilizes its tax exemption certificate, for example, in a way that it ought not to, it means that you do not have the funds to buy the hospital beds, where if one of us gets sick, we can go to the hospital and get good care. When a company or an agency utilizes their exemption certificate, means that we don't have sufficient funds to plug the budget each year to ensure that our schools have all the resources so that your children, my child and so on can get the best benefit of the resources of this country. We have to break it down in such a way for the public to appreciate that it's misuse of our tax money, monies that come out of our salaries, that is a problem, and we must get involved and say that 44 is not good, and we must get to a stage wherein we can say that we have low corruption in our country.
How are we doing compared to our peers in the region?
Jamaica is performing better to some of the other countries. For example, some of the strong framework that we have, a country like Barbados may not necessarily have it. I think we were performing better than Trinidad, just speaking from memory. But generally speaking, we are performing much better than several countries because we were ranked 73 out of 180 countries. However, it is still not at the rate and level that we need to be where we're satisfied as a country.
So, Transparency International has called on political leaders to strengthen independent justice and oversight, make political finance transparent, protect media freedom, and clamp down on cross-border flows of dirty money. Do any of these calls apply to the Jamaican government, you'd say?
Absolutely. We have a strong press in Jamaica, but we have seen situations, for example, where there is a threat of lawsuits against media practitioners or media practitioners going on social media and seeing their faces being aligned with different political parties. That's undermining the media's work to get their jobs done. We have seen the comments made in Parliament against the Integrity Commission, calling the Integrity Commission, the agents within the major anti-corruption framework as aligned with political parties, lacking in integrity. That type of commentary from political actors, it's unfortunate, and I think that lends to the broader undermining of the institutions. The fact as well that we have the Integrity Commission Act that was before a joint select committee that requires